Welcome to On the Edge, a show examining how deals actually happen in commercial real estate. Host Malcolm Davies, founder of Way Capital, speaks with professionals in development, investment, finance, and more for insights into how these business leaders get deals capitalized. Malcolm's career spans more than 20 years, during which time he has managed nearly $20 billion worth of financings. Now to your host, Malcolm.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of On the Edge. I have to laugh because Adrian sent me a calendar to make sure we scheduled this. He called it Over the Edge. So I want to make sure that this is not Over the Edge. This is On the Edge.
I must have been skiing at the time.
Yes. Adrian Berger, welcome to the latest edition of On the Edge.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
So we've known each other, I think we just figured out, at least 11 years.
Yep.
It's great to have you here. And we've known each other about the deal flow and everything we've been doing for the last 11 years. But, for the audience's perspective, let's get a little bit into your background.
Sure.
Currently, where do you work and what do you guys do within the platform at Cypress?
Yeah, so Cypress Equity Investments is a local LA-based family office founded in 2001. And we've predominantly been focused on the multifamily space, both affordable housing, market rate housing as an investor and a developer. We also have a small but growing self-storage division. And we've also done some other structuring type things along the way. So a lot of co-GP investing.
Sure.
We've done some rescue capital when the market allows it. We are an institutionally capitalized deal. So our deals are of the size and scales that attract institutional equity, of which we've done more than 100 of those deals in the company's 25-year history. But we also operate like a very entrepreneurial family office. So we can look at things in very creative ways. We like solving problems. A lot of people come to us when there's challenges or nuances in deals, or if they're a bit hairy. And so my role is I'm the managing director of acquisitions. So I oversee acquisitions nationally for the firm across our various activities. And I'm based here in LA.
I love it. So we'll get into the whole Cypress platform a little bit later. But part of On the Edge is also, how do commercial real estate deals get done? And at the end of the day, commercial real estate's about relationships. It's about trust.
Yep.
It's always great for people to understand who somebody is and where they came from. You have one of the best accents in the business. Talk about a little bit about where you're from, where you grew up, and ultimately how you ended up here in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Appreciate that. So I grew up in Sydney, in Australia, so very close to Bondi Beach. I'm sure a lot of people know about Bondi. And I really started my career as an engineer. I got a scholarship out of school with like the equivalent of like an AT&T to be a telecommunications engineer. So I was studying that. And really my family always invested in real estate. My dad was a real estate attorney. We owned a lot of retail properties and they did some single family investments. So I was around the real estate industry just in my life. And one of my earliest memories of the real estate space was being in the back of my dad's British sports car, Triumph Stag, which was notorious for breaking down. It sounded good and looked good, but it was always breaking down. I remember going out into like the suburbs of Sydney and we would go into these, local stores and he'd be talking to shopkeepers and business owners and asking them questions. And I was always like, what are you doing? And he was asking them how their business was going and what the area was like because he was assessing real estate investment opportunities. So that was kind of always in the background. My first ever real estate investment was I bought a very small share of a ski lodge in Thredbo, which is in the Snowy Mountains.
Interesting.
And that was because I love skiing, and also it was a great way to, get a loan and pay it off and learn how to save and do that, and end up selling that years later. But I started my career as an engineer, and then I ended up leaving Australia to go for an engineering job in the Philippines on a 6-month contract. This was back in 2001.
Yep.
And then I left that role. The dot-com crash happened. I kind of traveled the world a little bit and then went back to school to do my MBA and came out of that to work on more of the business development side of technology for an Australian software company. And they asked me to move to Singapore in 2005 to open their first international office.
Sure.
So I was very keen to have another overseas experience. And I went over there and did that. I was by myself. I was like a beachhead out there just knocking on doors, learning how to do business in Asia, in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, trying to convince major corporations to take on our marketing software at the time. And while I was there, I met an English guy that had a real estate company in Hong Kong. and he was selling, condos around the world to expats as investment opportunities. So two of my friends and I ended up buying a speculative condo, 2-bedroom condo in Vietnam, in Saigon, Vietnam. And while I was doing the analysis of that deal for my friends, they were saying, "Oh, you're in the wrong business." And so I was like, I didn't really like the guys I worked for in the technology company, and I wasn't really that, passionate about it. And so I embarked on a bit of a journey around the world, exploring where I wanted to live and what I wanted to do. And so I was looking at a number of different industries, including real estate. And I came to the realization that I wanted to be in real estate. I wanted to live in New York.
Sure.
And so I went to the guy in Hong Kong and I said to him, "Listen, I'm a client. I think your business is really interesting. I want to open an office for you, in Manhattan." And he thought I was totally crazy.
Yeah.
So I went away and wrote a business plan. And I came to Hong Kong. I remember standing there in the hotel on my 30th birthday. I was meeting the team, and this was sort of the crux of if I'd get the gig or not. And just sort of looking out the window and thinking, like, never in my wildest dreams did I imagine at 30 I'd be standing in a hotel room in Hong Kong trying to change careers to convince someone to let me move to Manhattan. Fortunately, it worked out. I moved to Hong Kong, spent about a year there learning the business, and then moved to New York at the end of 2008. So pretty terrible timing. I remember walking through Times Square in September of 2008.
Oh, yeah.
When it was announced that Bank of America was buying Merrill Lynch.
Yes.
And I had a friend at Merrill, and I called him straight away, and he was literally packing his desk. So I was like, wow, this is crazy. And so I ended up moving to New York. I was there for about seven years, worked for the Hong Kong company for a year, and then I switched to work for a broker. I was doing commercial, she was doing residential. I ended up actually starting my own firm in the city, doing consulting and brokerage. And then, met a girl, and we decided to move to California, California dream. I came out here in 2015.
Yep.
I'd been fortunate to meet David Rifkin from George Smith Partners.
Yes.
You and I had met 11 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in the conference room at George Smith as a guest of David's on the side, listening to you guys do your weekly call.
Yep.
Listening to you talk about equity and everyone else talking about debt. And I was like, oh, that guy's different. And David was very generous. And, I was interviewing with some big companies here and meeting some people, and I didn't really have a institutional background. Yeah. So it was hard for me to break into those sort of bigger shops. And David was like, you have to go work for an entrepreneur. And I was like, well, do you know anyone? And so he said, I know a guy. So he reached out to Michael Sorochinsky, our principal, and Michael agreed to meet me. And I met him at the Santa Monica Airport one Saturday morning at 8 a.m. And we got in his plane with his pilot, and I'm in the back seat, and he's literally interviewing me as we're flying up to Camarillo to meet David for breakfast.
Yes.
And that's how I met Michael. And after a couple of months of chatting, I ended up, going to work for him. I really wanted to move away from the brokerage world and go work for an investor or a principal.
Sure.
And 11 years later, it's been great. I've learned a lot. We've grown a great business.
So you have a really unique and interesting background. I think I actually just learned something myself there.
Okay, great.
We have the connection of Singapore. I lived there until I was 5.5.
I think I remember that.
But I was very young, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is, what did you learn about your experience globally that you think gives you a bit of an advantage or a competitive advantage, or at least perspective that other, let's call it just traditional stateside Americans might not have? I think your background is so unique living in these different areas, and also your background not outside of real estate.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And there's a few things I think that stand out. Number one was when I arrived in Singapore, the expat community was so welcoming.
Sure.
And they were very genuinely trying to understand what I was interested in, to try to plug me in to people that had similar interests so I could make friends. And so there was this idea of you always said yes to meeting somebody new and trying to help. And so I think that's a philosophy I've carried forward. In fact, just yesterday I sat down with someone who's, in graduate school that was introduced to me by a friend. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll meet with them and tell them about what I do and ask what they're doing and try to get them connected, right? That's, was one really big thing. I think really, working in environments that are of different cultures and different ways of doing business was a huge learning for me. I mean, trying to do sort of effectively sales or business development in Singapore was really difficult because it's a very different way of doing business to Australia. I mean, America and Australia have some similarities, but
Sure.
all the places I've lived and traveled to, there's just so many different ways of doing business. So being able to have experience doing business in other parts of the world, I think allows you to think more creatively about the deal-making side of things. You can think about different structures. You can think about different negotiation strategies. You can really try to understand people's desires, their goals, where they're coming from. So I think that was a big one. And then the third one is something that I really think is just a universal belief, which is your network is your most important thing.
Sure.
And if you can sincerely collect relationships and work on relationships and stay in front of people and really genuinely, sincerely understand who they are, where they come from, where they're going, and what they want to try to do, whether it's in real estate or not, like that's really valuable. And people and places are my most passionate thing. So growing your network and allowing you to say like, oh, you're going to do this deal here, or you want to be connected to someone there. Oh, I know somebody there. And that's, I think, really, really powerful and has sort of really helped me in getting jobs and getting deals, in growing my network.
It's interesting when I see you speak. I think there's probably no one on this planet that you can't connect with.
I don't know about that. I appreciate it's a big compliment. I think we can all get to the people that we want to. I think that, real estate is actually a much smaller world than you realize it is at the beginning. At the beginning, it's very daunting. There's all these big players, all these big companies, and eventually you kind of find the groove of those people that are really active, that are really involved, and you can get connected because everyone wants to connect because that's our business.
I have a good friend who always tells me that you find your people eventually,
right? And
those are the people you spend your time with, and the people you do your deals with, and the like. And at the end of the day, you guys are making decisions to do deals in a lot of different ways. So when you think about Cypress, you think about co-GP, you think about doing deals with your big LP partners, you think about things like LIHTC, you think about things like doing credit enhancements. There's a lot of things to unpack here. So I kind of want to take a step back. So in your business model, tell us about the co-GP platform and how the firm sources opportunities with sponsors that come to you with an opportunity, whatever it may be. How have you been doing that? How long you've been doing that? And how does somebody who's watching this, for example, think about, Cypress as a co-GP partner and what you bring to the table potentially for their opportunities? Yeah,
great. So when I joined in 2015, it was right at the time where Cypress was trying to expand outside of LA. So Michael had a great run here, built about 2,500 units in LA, and was trying to expand the company nationally. And he did that through a co-GP investment. So what he was doing was finding experienced developers. It was really focused on multifamily market rate development at that time, trying to find really experienced developers that he liked and that saw the world the same way, and that there was a need for something Cypress could bring, whether that was balance sheet support, whether that was GP capital, pursuit dollars. We have a big back office infrastructure on accounting and associates and things like that. What could we do to really help that GP focus on what they're best at and let us help them with the stuff that's really slowing them down? So if they're really great at finding deals, but they're spending their whole time doing construction draws, let us do construction draws, right? Or if they're doing these sides of deals and they want to do bigger deals and their balance sheet's not big enough, let us help with that. So there was the philosophy of trying to have a platform that we could meld and adjust to everybody's needs, so long as we weren't really being promoted, right? We wanted to be really shoulder to shoulder. We're not a passive investor ever. So it's really more of like, how can we really help and add a lot of value here to turn something into a bigger platform?
Sure.
And so that allowed us to expand nationally. So we're now in about 16 markets around the country. That was predominantly has been market rate ground up development, co-GP. We also did one with a LIHTC operator that spun out of a bigger shop, and we helped her do 12 syndications, and that was our entree into LIHTC. So it's really beneficial to us because we learn about a new market, we get experience in a new market, and maybe a new product type. So the way it works is it's pretty simple, where we look at it as more like a 50-50 type structure or a true pro rata structure. So if we're more than 50%, then we're going to earn that percentage of the GP profit. And so we're out there just trying to find groups that are doing things in, like, let's say the top 30 MSAs. It could be existing multifamily. It could be LIHTC, development or operating. It could be self-storage. We're a little bit less focused on the market rate development side today just because there's no LP equity.
Right.
And historically, we felt really confident we could bring LP equity as a co-GP. And like that is just a space right now that's a little bit challenging. So
It'll come back.
It'll come back eventually. And I mean, we believe it. And we're sitting on 8,000 developable units across 5 markets right now. And so we'll build those eventually. But in this moment of the cycle, there's no LP equity for that. So even as a co-GP, like we can't turn water into wine and find an LP. So we're really more focused on market rate acquisitions, LIHTC, self-storage.
If you're willing to take preferred equity or structured equity, there's a lot of that capital available.
I mean,
for you.
that's everywhere, but that's also something that we're not also that comfortable with.
Absolutely understand that. So in those situations, when I wrote a post last week on social media about like if you're stuck in the ground, right? How many development deals right now across the United States, except for the great markets that are very, very, very strong right now. Think about like you guys when you think about the things that you do. If you're sourcing a new opportunity, would a developer think about you as coming in early to handle pre-development expenses like construction drawings and pursuing and acquiring land or signing option payments on land, providing the balance sheet support for those construction loans when they would come? Is that part of the whole quote unquote co-GP package that 100%. Cypress provides?
So we closed on a number of co-GP partnerships recently in a number of varying ways. So one of them in LA is with a group that's vertically integrated as an operator. They have a property management arm, and we're really working with them to help on the capitalization side. They have the team to find the deals, property manage the deals. What we're really adding in terms of value is balance sheet support, capital markets expertise are the 2 main things that we're really providing in that example. And that's really pursuing more of a welfare tax exemption strategy, which is the state tax exemption program. Another group were a smaller group and doing smaller deals with an ADU value add, which I think is a great business plan. And they needed us to come in and provide a bit more, corporate legitimacy to the platform and then be able to get the LP invested. And we were able to come in and bring in an institutional LP to fund that platform. We also helped with providing balance sheet support, GP dollars, and then we have a credit business as a sort of a side business that Michael's invested in, that we brought that relationship to the table that came up with a very unique product to help us buy those deals and then provide construction financing when we needed to do the ADUs. So that's a lot of value that we're bringing. And the idea there is these are smaller deals, 10 to 40 units at a time. We want to sort of aggregate that, roll that up into a much bigger platform and see where that ends up going. And then the third example on the LIHTC side is we've partnered up with a group in California, and we're doing exactly what you're saying. They're a developer. We're pursuing land together. We're funding pre-development. We're funding option payments. We're funding gap equity, which is a really big deal in LIHTC. So we can do all of that. It just depends on the group, the situation, but we are certainly open to that.
So we'll talk about the gap equity and the credit enhancement for a moment. But in those situations, you seem like you're getting very creative about where deal flow is today in today's market. I think, for the audience's perspective, I think we all realize how difficult it is to get a traditional market rate development deal out of the ground in a variety of markets. But what you've mentioned is something that's unique, which is providing, workforce, naturally occurring affordable housing, LIHTC or and the like. When you think about those types of opportunities, the sponsors that could use you as a co-GP might be someone who's a senior executive at a large institutional firm that wants to go launch on their own. Is that the time where it seems to make a lot of sense, where they have a lot of expertise and credibility, however, they don't have the LP relationships, they don't have the credibility that Cypress has, that they can team up with you and then ultimately go back to that market and get some of these more creative deals capitalized in today's environment?
Yeah, I think it could be a number of different types of groups or people. So that example of someone spinning out and starting their own firm and not having a big team or resources, that's a great category for us to really help them build out that business. But they've got expertise in a market that we like. Let's say it's in LIHTC and they've got a track record of winning bond awards in that state, and they know that they have all the relationships and know how to get it all done. and we have the capital and we have the team. That's certainly a great one. And we've done it with medium-sized groups and large groups as well. So it's really just, I think it's situational. And I think a lot of it really comes down to what's the personality match.
Right.
Do we see the world the same way? Is there trust? Do we both believe we're bringing something to the table? Because the worst thing you want is that you do a deal and the other group is your co-GP partner is like, man, I'm giving half of my deal away to these Cypress guys. And like, what are they even doing? So we really spend a lot of time up front understanding what their needs are and really making sure they understand what value we can bring.
Sure.
And if we can't, we can't. And if we can, then we try to, really go for it and make it into something really big.
I always have a joke about no money is not all equal. And being able to see eye to eye and have synergies doesn't mean two groups are, one's right and one's wrong. It's just how do you get along? Do you have that personality trait to connect? And, if someone calls you and you're like, I don't really want to talk to that individual, maybe you have to answer the phone or not. Don't do the deal with that person.
Right.
It's not that they're a bad person. It's just ultimately that you don't quote unquote, they're not your people.
You want to be excited, right? Like when the phone rings from that co-GP partner, you're like, what's the next deal? Right?
Yeah.
Because we're all deal junkies here. Like, what's the next deal? What's the next issue to solve, right? And so we take that approach. But at the end of the day, like one of the things I've loved about being at CEI is that when things change, we pivot and adapt. And we are not scared to try different things or explore different areas. And that's really, I think, a little bit unique because we're a family office in that way, even though we're institutionally capitalized. So we feel like what can we do really well and pivot? Like 3 years ago when the capital markets world stopped for market rate development, and we were all in on that business strategy, we looked around at our assets and our know-how and what we were doing, and we were like, where do we think the world's going to go? And obviously huge tailwinds in affordable housing.
Sure.
And we had this relationship with this co-GP in Florida that we had done 12 syndications, was really successful. We liked that business, but we realized we didn't have the expertise in-house and we didn't fully understand how we were going to capitalize the gaps that appear. And so we set about hiring people, talking to capital, raising money around that. And then fast forward to today, we now have a team that we've been building out of experts that come from the LIHTC space. We have a huge capital partner that's committed a large amount of money.
Great.
That business is off to the races. We have 10 sites in California we control. We're in negotiations with a bunch of co-GPs around the country. We're chasing, existing product around the country. So that was one pivot. And then the other pivot was in self-storage. We built a few projects in the city and we really were doing it not really proactively. It was like one of our development guys found a deal in East LA and we did it. And then we sort of really built up our expertise, our understanding, our underwriting, our processes around doing that more proactively, more as a platform. And now, we've also raised some co-GP money around that, where we've got a pipeline of six development deals now. So that's another example. And then on coming out of the co-GP world, we were always asked, would you just rent your balance sheet? And for years, Michael's like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden this year, we're like, hey, maybe we should rent the balance sheet and just do it not 100 times, but find really qualified sponsors or operators and, charge a fee for providing balance sheet support. So we've always found ways to pivot so we can continue to deal make because we love doing deals and we want to keep growing.
So let's talk about, for a moment, take a step back on the LIHTC.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity to partner with you in other geographies in the country?
Yes.
Okay. So that's an availability. And have you thought about what those geographies might be?
Yeah. So we're looking at, generally we like California, Washington State, we like Arizona, Texas, Carolinas, Tennessee, the Southeast. We'd love to do something in the Northeast.
I think you've hit
Midwest, pretty much the whole country, except for maybe a couple of maybe
not Alaska or Hawaii, but
maybe
the rest
not Alaska
of them.
or Hawaii, or maybe not Mississippi or Arkansas or Louisiana,
states.
Things like that. I think where we're sort of approaching LIHTC is we see obviously a very strong desire to create affordable housing, given what's happening in the market. I think we've taken a slightly different approach from a financing perspective than has historically been the case. So historically, developers and operators didn't need any outside capital to do these deals. You could pretty much fund them 100% with debt and state and
Right.
state
You
funding
need
for
that,
the
you need
bonds.
that capital today.
Yeah, and so today with bond pricing has moved around and construction costs and rents and operating expenses and all these different things that impact the underwriting, now you're seeing gaps in these deals.
Yeah.
And historically, those have been filled with what the industry calls soft money. So state credits or, let's say schools have a fund or a county has a fund and you're trying to get 500 grand, $1 million, whatever from them to fill your gap. But you give away a lot of the back end of the deal, which tends to be which is the biggest cash flow after the 15 years is the back end value
Right.
of the equity that the tax credit investor put in, which they got tax benefits for.
Sure.
That just becomes to the GP. So we sort of saw an opportunity there to focus on that. And so that really comes back to places where you're going to see population growth, rent growth, AMI growth, because that's going to create more value in that back end.
Sure.
And so we're very focused on what we call, higher resource areas. So close to jobs, close to transportation, close to retail, schools, because you want your affordable workers and people living where they can go and do their jobs, right? As opposed to just
Put out in the middle of nowhere.
put in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, how does that help anybody?
Right.
So we've taken that sort of approach to it. And so we'll do it really in most places. And again, where we can find people that have the local expertise, because every state's process is different. The way in which you win bonds is different.
Mm-hmm.
The political environment is different.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to really have people that know how to do it.
Right.
Because it's really complicated.
And so in that scenario, does CEI help bring that expertise to make sure that you can help, establish and get the grants and all of the, resources to provide capital, not just the fact that you are providing gap capital, which I think is one of the primary reasons that you would want to partner with CEI, because you're right, there is a gap here on a lot of these deals, and that's what makes them difficult sometimes, besides capturing all of these resource capital sources to do the investments in these opportunities.
Yeah. I think we know certain markets really well, and there's
Sure.
markets we don't know. So we're not going to be great at helping win a bond award in some state. But if
Sure.
we can find someone locally that's done it 10 times, 5 times, 50 times, and then they need capital, they need pre-development, capital, they need pursuit capital,
Sure.
they need guarantee support. Like there's a partnership there. You've got local expertise, we've got, capital and support. Like that's the way in which we're approaching it. How can we, help that person really grow their business or that company?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not arrogant enough to think that we know how to do LIHTC in every state, because we don't.
Right.
And it's a bit of a black box. So we'd rather find people that are really great at it and partner with them.
Well, hopefully this can help.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
All right. So, coming closer to the end here, but the credit enhancement platform.
Yeah.
We've started in that business about 7 years ago, actually 8 years ago.
Yeah.
People would always ask, well, why do you need to do that? Is that a situation where the institutional LPs will agree to having a credit enhancement in the GP? And the answer I can say is absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, there is actually part of the world, even today, where developers were challenged, for example, where their net worth and liquidity is less than when they actually got the construction loan. Mm-hmm. Now they're in a multifamily asset needing to do a refinance. They have an institutional partner, but they don't have the net worth and liquidity anymore to get the loan. So credit enhancement doesn't just work on development deals. It now does also work on bridge loans and the like.
Refis,
I think it's an amazing industry. Had been a bit of a cottage industry.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about just how you think about it. Are you doing it simply for fees? Do you take a small piece? I know a lot of banks do require a very small investment in the GP to kind of allow for the credit enhancement. But maybe tell the audience just a little bit about how somebody would approach you to say, hey, we might need a little bit of assistance here on this particular opportunity.
We're thinking about it more from a fee-based standpoint. I mean, because we have our co-GP program, so we could do a co-GP with the credit enhancement, but in not all cases that's what we want to do or what they want, really.
Right.
A lot of people want co-GP, but they really want LP, right? And or they want a passive co-GP. So there's a lot of situations where we like the deal, we like the people, but they don't really like how hands-on we are as a co-GP, which is fine.
Right.
So we kind of created the credit enhancement to sort of be more of like a supplement in that way, to say like, okay, well, what do you need? Oh, you need more liquidity, for this deal because it's too big or because it's a refi.
Right.
So then we just focus on it as just more of a fee-based service. On the development side, we're not really taking a piece of any of the back end. It's just more of a fee-driven situation. If it's an acquisitions deal or a refi of an existing asset, then our fee percentage goes down and we look for a little piece of the carry.
Sure.
But it's flexible. And at the end of the day, like we always are, it's like if it's quality sponsorship and we like the deal and the underwriting makes sense, we'll figure out a way to make a deal that everybody's going to be happy with. Like that's how we kind of like to do business.
It's interesting to see how the growth of our industry has happened over the last 11 years since we've known each other.
I know.
But on behalf of Way Capital, myself, our team, we can't thank you enough for being the latest guest on The Edge. Thank you, Adrian Berger.
Thanks, Malcolm. Great to be here. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for taking the time to tune into our latest show. As always, you can find us through our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@wayontheedge or at our website at www.waycapital.com. Until next time, keep working on the edge.